How's it going, everybody? In this video, I want to give you guys my 2024-2025 NFL record prediction. Now, it has been a month and a half since my last upload. Obviously, I tried to do some NCAA content. Really didn't like the game. I think the game is terrible. But now that the preseason has ended and 53-man rosters are finally, I think that they're all done. I think it was like 4 o'clock on a Tuesday that 53 final man rosters had to be announced. We are here and we're on playoffpredictor.com if you want to make one of your own brackets. Very fun to do. I like to do these every season. But last year I did a whole series with a ton of effort and I did around 10 videos each division. But in this video I'm kind of short for time. College is starting, as of course it's very late August as I upload this, and I wasn't able to have as much time this year. I had an internship, I had 2 jobs, and I was enjoying my personal life, going on vacations and stuff, which I highly recommend. If you guys are young, make sure you guys live your life outside of social media and stuff, and outside of making videos. I made a lot during the draft season, so it was a much needed break for me. And then this season, I don't have a determined scheduled content series, but let me know in the comments what you guys want me to do. Obviously, no Madden or college football content. Let's focus on NFL stuff. Maybe if you guys want me to do power rankings, if you guys want me to do film breakdowns, I could do all of that stuff. But without further ado, let's get into our first team that I want to break down. And obviously, I'm not going to go by seeding, as you guys can see the seeding right now. I want to go individually by team and figure out really how I think they'll do this year. And obviously, we'll sculpt out a few rules first. It's one, these the games, are more of a kind of a record. I want to figure out what record they're going to have based on their schedule and not exactly how every game is going to turn out, because there are a ton of uncertainties. And then the next thing is that I don't factor in injuries. For example, like if I thought that Rodgers was going to get hurt again, I would give them like a magical 10 record. These hypotheticals are if the teams stay the way that they are the majority of the season, or whether a team's going to start out well and finish worse, or start out worse and then finish well. I'll give a good example of that later in the video. But starting off with my favorite team, the New York Jets. I think that they're going to go 10-7 this year. I've had this in my mind since the beginning of last season. If Rodgers is fully healthy, I think the Jets will be a very decent offense. And I say very decent in terms of, like, I think top 16 offense, like that. Not top 10, but borderline top 10. You really have Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson as your main offensive cogs. You've kind of built the offensive line over the offseason, signing Tyron Smith, drafting Olu Fasano in the draft. So you have these pieces on offense, and it's kind of all determined based on Rodgers' success. How is he going to come off of his Achilles tear, et cetera, et cetera. But then you have a top 3 defense, really. The only defenses that can really compete with the Jets defense is the 49ers and the Ravens. If you want to add in, I don't really even have, if you want to rival in the Cowboys, you definitely can. The Chiefs, if you want to add them in, you can. But there aren't many defenses that can rival with the Jets. You had 5 Pro Bowlers last year. You had 2, I didn't know, they had 3 All-Pros as well. I think they have the best defense in the league, and I think that the Jets are going to be good, and I think that they have kind of varying success throughout the regular season. I don't think they beat the 49ers in the first game of the season, even though a lot of people do. It just kind of depends. I did this in terms of how to get the 10-7 record, because obviously I have the Niners over here. But I do think that they could very easily win this game. But then you look at the rest of the season, they swap with the Bills. They go 4-2 in the division. They beat the Patriots twice. Finish strong to make the playoffs here with 2 wins against the Bills and the Dolphins. Overall, I am decently excited for the season, but I think during June, July, I was not, because it's really make or break expectations. If they don't have success this year, we're likely saying goodbye to Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh, head coach, likely Aaron Rodgers as well if he retires. So it's a concerning season. They don't have the hardest strength of schedule as they have the past couple of years, but they do face some really good teams like the Texans, like the Bills, and like the 49ers. I'm going to try to not make the rest of the record predictions that long-winded. I obviously have the most information on the Jets because I keep up with them pretty much every day. But moving on to the Miami Dolphins, I do have them making the playoffs again. I have them going 10-7. They have a harder strength of schedule this year. As you can see, it's over 500. Facing a lot of good teams. Obviously, the AFC East faces the NFC South, so they have to face the Texans, they have to face the Colts. And we also face the NFC West, teams like the Niners, teams like the Cardinals. Overall, the Miami Dolphins, you lose Vic Fangio, who goes somewhere else. So their defense, especially their secondary, is going to be a little bit weird. I don't know if they're going to move Kader Conwu to the outside. That you obviously have Jalen Ramsey. Your secondary is with Javon Holland is pretty good, and their linebacker core with David Long Jr. is a really defending linebacking core. And then their defensive line, you don't know what Bradley Chubb is going to produce this year. He ended his season with injury. Jalen Phillips had an Achilles tear. Don't know what he's going to do this season. And then you look at the offense. I wish they invested heavily into their interior offensive line. I think that's their weak point on offense. But then again, you have Tyreek Hill and Tua Tagovailoa, who both got more money this offseason. Tyreek Hill got a contract restructure. Tua Tagovailoa, 4 years, $120 million. I think that was how the money worked out. But I think that their offense is going to probably be either the best or the second best in the NFL, as it was last year. You have a really good running back trio now with Jalen Wright from Tennessee. You have Devon Achane, who was phenomenal last year, and you have Raheem Mostert, who had one of the best red zone touchdown rates in the NFL. So I really do like them. I just think that their defense is going to lose them some games, and then obviously Tua Tagovailoa making mistakes late in games. That's how they lose. But if they get out hot early, they're going to score a lot of points. So I have the Miami Dolphins being 5th in the league. Moving on to the Buffalo Bills, I have some major concerns about the Bills this year. And that boils down to a few reasons. The first is their strength of schedule. They face a lot of tough teams like the Ravens, teams like the AFC East with the Dolphins, with the Jets. They face the Jaguars. They face the Chiefs. They face the Niners. They face the Lions and the Rams. They face a lot of tough teams this year. Even if I have them going 4-2 in the division, swapping with the Jets and Dolphins, beating the Patriots twice, I have some major concerns about their defense. And I think this was revealed a lot last year where they were losing close games. Example, the Eagles, where giving up points late and kind of struggling in the secondary aspect. Kaiir Elam has not really worked out. Tre'Davious White was hurt again, and now I don't even think he's on the roster. I think they have a lot of secondary issues. Oh, and if you add in Poyer and Hyde, both of them are gone this year. So now you have Taylor Rapp and you have DeMar Hamlin as your starting safeties. Is that going to be enough to stop a lot of these offensive teams that they're going to face? Example, the Cardinals, the Dolphins, the Jaguars love to go over the top a lot. The Chiefs, the 49ers, the Jets. We have a lot of these teams that can take the top off of defenses with explosive plays. And I think the Bills are going to struggle with that. Now, their defensive line is very, very good with A.J. Epinesa, Gregory Rousseau, and Ed Oliver in the interior. And then with the offense, and then I forgot to mention Matt Milano is going to miss significant time in this season as well. But then on the offensive side, I think their wide receiver core has bounced back from what it was last year. You lose Stephon Diggs, you lose Gabe Davis. But then you have Khalil Shakir, who I think is a breakout candidate. You drafted Keon Coleman, who I think is also a really nice addition, as well as signing Curtis Samuel. With your running back room, you have Ray Davis from Duke, who you drafted, and you also have James Cook. And then you have Josh Allen as your quarterback. Top 2 or 3 quarterback in the league, depending on how you look at Lamar Jackson. I still think that they are going to have success. I think it is going to come in a lot of close games, as well as their difficult schedule. I wouldn't be surprised if they do finish under 500, but then again, I think that they are going to be a playoff team. But I don't think it's. I think that this year, especially with the Jets improving a lot, one of the winners of the offseason, and with the Dolphins being just as good as they were last year, I think that the Bills, who face heavy regression again this year, I think they go 9-8. And then moving on to the Patriots, who I think are going to be the worst team in the AFC. Again, they have a very tough strength of schedule, as they did last year, facing the AFC North. They faced the AFC East. They faced the NFC West. Very tough divisions, very tough teams, as well as facing teams like the Bears that I think are going to do really good. But other than that, it's going to boil down to the youth of their team. They have a really young team. They have a young head coach in Gerard Mayo. Rookie quarterback Drake May, who I think is going to get significant time. Arguably could start week 1. Jacoby Brissett was hurt in the last preseason game. You have a really young receiver core, headlined by, rookies Javon Baker, Jalen Polk. You have Demario Douglas. They just released Juju Smith-Schuster. And then their defense, obviously, is still young too, headlined by Christian Barmore, who's going to miss some time, Christian Gonzalez as well. So they have a really young team. They have a young head coach with Jerod Mayo, who has just climbed the coaching ladder with the Patriots this last couple of years. Obviously, Jerod Mayo is a Patriot legend. I think he won a Super Bowl with them. But I think that this season is going to be a struggle. I think it's going to be the same as it was last year. I think they are going to lose a lot of good games to good teams. But then again, I think that they're going to show some highlight. I think they're going to have a lot of, growing moments. And that could be through, Drake May making mistakes or having really good plays. So I think it's going to be inconsistent. But I think that there is going to be positive signs going into the future. And if there aren't positive signs, if they just stink again, then we're going to have a question about, Mayo and stuff. But other than that, I do have them struggling going 4-13. Moving on to the AFC North, starting off with my predicted division winner, the Baltimore Ravens. I don't think they'll face as much regression as people think. You lose Mike Macdonald, who is their most important departure of the season. Obviously, their defensive coordinator helped lead the number one ranked defense in the league. Again, you have Lamar Jackson, you have Zay Flowers, who I think will become their definitive wide receiver one, good offensive line. You do lose John Simpson and Morgan Moses, who both come to the Jets, but they had another good draft, and their defensive roster is still the same. You did lose Patrick Queen, but I don't think he's near as impactful as Roquan Smith. Your secondary is pretty good as well. You still have Marlon Humphrey. Still have a good secondary. Geno Stone had his breakout year. And their defensive line as well is still very good, with Madubuike getting a contract extension in the offseason. I'm pretty even on this team. I do think that they're going to struggle at times. Again, like I have examples like a loss to the Raiders, a loss to the Chargers, a loss to the Steelers here, a loss to the Texans. I think that they have these weird games. They can really crush good teams. Like I have them beating the Chiefs. I have them beating the Cowboys. I have them beating the Bills. Like they crush really good teams, but then they have weird games. I think that we saw that last year where they lost to the Steelers when they were up by, I think, 14 points. But then again, I think that they're going to be a very solid team. I have them going 11-6, and overall, they didn't change drastically enough. This really depends on injuries, and if the injuries pile up, which they have, the Ravens have been one of the most injured teams over the last 5 years. That will determine their season, but I do have them 11-6 and being the third seed. This is a pretty out of character moment for me because I don't like the Steelers. I have been on record giving them a loss or a losing record after losing record after losing record. This is the first year that I actually think highly of the Steelers. I like their moves over the offseason, particularly with their draft. They drafted Troy Fautanu in the first round. And they drafted Zach Frazier in the second round, built the offensive line through the offseason. You have Daniels, you have Broderick Jones from last season. So and Mason McCormick, they drafted in the fourth round. So they've really built their offensive line, a really young line, but it's very much complete now. They traded a fourth round pick for Justin Fields, also signed Russell Wilson to a $1.2 million deal in the offseason. So hopefully the quarterback inconsistencies that they had last year won't be as drastic. But then again, they also signed arguably the two worst starting quarterbacks in the league that are only really rivaled by like Zach Wilson of last year. I don't think Russell Wilson is as bad as people think. But again, I think he has faced significant regression to where he's a borderline starting quarterback now. That's why the Denver Broncos ate all that money last year. But you do have Arthur Smith as your new offensive coordinator, as he was fired from the Falcons. I really, really love this rushing attack that I think they're going to do. They're going to use they should use Justin Fields particularly as a running quarterback only, or as kind of a fake run and then throw it guy. I think he's a package quarterback. And then again, you have Russell Wilson who can extend plays. And then you have Jalen Warren and Najee Harris, who I think I think this might be the first time we see 1,000 yard rushers since, Lamar and Mark Ingram. I think the running back tandem is going to have a really good year. I really like their offensive line, particularly for run blocking. Adding Mason McCormick was such an important part to that. And then, their defense, TJ Watt, Minka Fitzpatrick. They added Patrick Queen, who I think will be their Mike which I don't know if Patrick Queen kind of is. I think he's a blitzing linebacker and kind of a weak side guy. And then you have Joey Porter Jr., who had a really phenomenal year at cornerback last year. I think he can have a really good sophomore season as well. And other than that, I have them going 9-8, losing to obviously good teams like the Eagles and like the Chiefs, but then again beating or swapping with the Bengals, Browns, and Ravens. The Bengals have been a team that I have been particularly low on for the past couple of years, ever since their Super Bowl victory. And it's really boiled down to just injuries. It unfortunately is. You look at Joe Burrow, has had 2 significant injuries since. You have Jamar Chase. He missed a lot of time in 2023. Or not last year, but in 2022 after they won. You look at T. Higgins. He's been in and out of the lineup a ton. You look at their defense, and their secondary has kind of been in and out. You lose Chidobe Awuzie over the offseason. I don't know who they signed, but their secondary is weak this year. You have Cam Taylor-Britt as your cornerback 1, and then again, their safeties. You lost Jesse Bates You lost Jesse Bates last year. I think that really showed this year. And I do like the offense. You do have a running back duo in Chase Brown and Zach Moss. But then again, I look at kind of other stuff, like you lose Brian Callahan, who was your offensive coordinator throughout your Super Bowl run. And what is their offense going to look like this year? I think that Joe Burrow is still a top 5 quarterback, but he has some inconsistencies, and especially in the beginning of the year. Obviously, they face the Patriots, kind of a layup week 1, but they could lose this game. They lose a lot of early games in the season. I mean, they're lucky to come out, 3-3 in my prediction, or really 4-3 if you go to week 7. But I don't think they have been as strong as a team as they were back in their Super Bowl run, and I think that really was a run. But I have them 10th in the conference, 9-8 this year. I'm not super high on the Bengals, especially in this tough division with the Ravens, Steelers, and Browns. I think it's kind of going to be an even year for them. And then moving on to the Cleveland Browns. This is my least favorite team in the division. I think they have the most fundamental problems in their lineup. The first is obviously their quarterback with Deshaun Watson. When they play, I know they went 5-1 with him being the starter, or really starting the game. They won against the Colts with him only completing 1 pass out of 5 attempts. Against the Ravens, when they won, Greg Newsome III, he scored a pick 6 that helped them get back into the game like within a minute left. And then he blew the game versus the Steelers, threw a late pick 6, fumbled the ball as well. In that game, Nick Chubb ended his season. And then, I mean, he had a 60% completion percentage. He had 7 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. I think that his prime is past him. I think that he isn't a good player. I don't think he's arguably a starting caliber quarterback in this league. Look at how Joe Flacco kind of unlocked their lineup this year, especially with Amari Cooper and distributing the ball around. I mean, a 39-year-old quarterback played better than Deshaun Watson, who is still 28. I think he's turning 29 this season. So I have them pretty much losing against every good team, and I have them losing weird games like against the Commanders. I do have them splitting the division, though, 3-3, because I just have every team in this division splitting. But other than that, I do like their defense. I understand what Jim Schwartz has done, especially with, Myles Garrett, who won the Defensive Player of the Year, with their secondary, with Denzel Ward, Greg Newsome III, Martin Emerson Jr., very, very, very good cornerback trio. But I'm just concerned. I just don't think that their offensive success, especially without Nick Chubb and with Deshaun Watson being, if he plays the whole year, I don't think they will have as much success as they did with Flacco, who helped them make the playoffs last year. So I do have them going 8-9 and finishing last in the division. Moving on to one of my favorite divisions in the NFL this year, it's going to be the AFC South. I think that this is going to be a very, very entertaining division, especially led by the Houston Texans, who I think they're arguably my favorite team in the AFC, because you look at how CJ Stroud played last year. He was an MVP candidate as a rookie. And you look at their receiving core with Tank Dell, who had a phenomenal rookie season. He did have a Lisfranc injury that ended it, but then you have a breakout with Nico Collins. Devin Singletary looked phenomenal. You had a great offensive line led by Laramie Tunsil. You have DeMarco Ryan as head coach, who led the defense. Defense was phenomenal. Singletary entered his name as a top 10 cornerback. You had Will Anderson win the Rookie of the Year last year. I really like the Texans this year. I have them going 12-5, finishing second in the division, having a tied record with the Chiefs, who I'll get to in a minute. They do have a hard strength of schedule. They face a lot of good teams, including like teams like the Chiefs, like the Lions, like the Dolphins. You have the Ravens on the schedule. A lot of tough teams, but then again, you add Stephon Diggs in this offseason, who I don't even think will be the most impactful receiver on this roster. You basically have two or three potential 1,000-yard receivers on your your receiver room or in your receiver room, and as well as they had to cut Noah Brown because they have such a deep receiver room with like John Mechie, even if you want to include him. And then with the running back room, they added Cam Akers, and they traded for Joe Mixon, who I don't know how impactful he'll be. He's kind of an inefficient runner. We'll see how he does this year. But then you look at the defense with Singletary and Will Anderson, and I think I get very excited for the Houston Texans this year. I think they could have a potentially deep run in the playoffs, as well as they really manhandled the Browns in the playoffs last year. Unfortunately, did lose to, I think it was the Chiefs. But I think the Houston Texans will be a very, very, very good team this year. I have the Colts sneaking in the playoffs as the 7th seed. Obviously, I have a lot of 9-8 teams. That includes, the Bills, the Steelers, the Bengals, the Colts, and the Raiders. They ended up making the playoffs because of their strength of schedule. That's just how this works. But again, I do think that they have a potential to go 10-7 and kind of secure that playoff spot. I do like the Indianapolis Colts a lot this year. The main issue with them was their defense. I think they allowed over 20 points a game, but then again, they scored 23 points a game. And I think that was like 7th in the NFL. Shane Steichen in his first year with the Colts helped revitalize really that offense that kind of died when you saw like Frank Reich become the head coach. And I really like their team this year. Anthony Richardson, I think, will have a breakout year. The rushing attack, I think, will be top 5. You have Jonathan Taylor. You have, obviously, Anthony Richardson, who will help that. You have a very good run-blocking offensive line. And then with the receiver core, you have Michael Pittman, you have Josh Downs, you have Adonai Mitchell, who they drafted in the 2nd round. Really like that offense a lot. And then with the defense, you still have DeForest Buckner. You still have Kenny Moore the second, the slot cornerback who made a Pro Bowl last year. But then again, their secondary, their boundary and their safety unit, like you look at like Julius Brents, who didn't have a great year, who was a draft pick in 2023. I think that they'll score a lot of points, but then allow a lot of points. It really just kind of comes down to how Anthony Richardson plays and if the run game can really carry them to the playoffs, which I think it can, and that's why I have them as the 7th seed. Moving on to the Jacksonville Jaguars, who I see facing major regression this season. They obviously lost the division lead to the Colts and the Texans, finishing behind them. The Texans winning the division, making the playoffs, and the Colts finishing as the 8th seed, I'm pretty sure. But the Jacksonville Jaguars, man, their defense has just not held up the past couple of years. And without that really lucky comeback versus the Chargers in 2023, I don't think that they would have or would be hailed as this good, which is strange. I mean, Trevor Lawrence should really be better. He should be a very good player, but I don't know what it is. Is it an offensive line injury? It's obviously a turnover injury. I think he's never finished a season in his career without 10 interceptions. I don't know. And then you lose Calvin Ridley this offseason, and then Zay Jones goes to the Jaguars. You do sign Gabe Davis, who I don't think will be much of an impact. You do draft Brian Thomas Jr., who I'm very high on. And then you have Christian Kirk. You have you come from 2 years ago where you have a very horizontal crossing attack with, Christian Kirk and Zay Jones. And now you have just a straight vertical attack with Brian Thomas, Gabe Davis on the outside. So now you kind of limit your offense to just, go forward basically. And then Etienne is not a very efficient running back as well. And their offensive line is going to have to hold up for a long time, especially if you want a lot of vertical routes. And Trevor Lawrence, he's going to throw a lot of interceptions. He's going to get sacked a lot. And then the offensive success is going to be limited. That's kind of my take on their offense. And then with the defense, I do like how Javon Walker has developed. He had 9.5 sacks last year. His bull rush is one of the best in the league. And then you have Josh Hines Allen, obviously Josh Allen, the second one, but now he's Joshua Hines Allen. But then their secondary, it's very weak. Um, did they draft? I don't even think they drafted a cornerback, which I would have liked them to. And their safeties are weak as well. Their linebacking core with Foyesade Aluakon, sure he can tackle, but he doesn't cover very good. I'm not high on this team, so I have them going 7-10. And then moving on to the Tennessee Titans, who I'm arguably higher on than the Jaguars. I really like the head coaching addition in Brian Callahan from the Bengals. I think that the running game is going to be really, really good. Like Tyjae Spears a lot. I think that Tony Pollard, who had a good showing in his preseason game, they had around a 66-33% split. So I really do like the running game. But again, I'm still worried about the offensive line. I know that they did draft J.C. Latham, 7th overall in the draft, who I think will be very good at right tackle, especially within the run game. But then again, Will Levis kind of concerns me. I don't know if he has the ability to be kind of a high-end quarterback in the league. He was okay. Like, I would say he was good in the 8 games that he played in. Very aggressive player, whether through his legs, whether through the air. You saw him throw a ton of touchdowns to DeAndre Hopkins, who will start the year on the IL. They did sign Calvin Ridley, who I think will be good, but then again, Levis is a guy who he can't really lean the gas off the ball. He throws it as hard as he can, like every single time. So short routes kind of don't work as efficiently as him throwing the ball down the field, which is good. I think that's good, but then again, their defense wasn't very good last year. I don't think it'll be particularly good this year. I really did like the trade of L'Jarius Sneed, who they're going to pay a lot of money. But then again, there's other secondary units are really bad. Like I think that Christian Fulton maybe is their cornerback too. And what has he done the past couple of years? They released Caleb Farley. They lost Kevin Byard last year in a trade. They don't have the best safety unit. They don't have the best linebacker unit. And then on the defense is really Jeffrey Simmons, who's your main disruptor on the defensive line. I don't particularly think that Will Levis is going to take them over the edge, and they'll probably be a top 10 pick in the draft next year. And then I'll start off the AFC North or AFC West, sorry, with the Kansas City Chiefs. Who again, I think they're going to be good. I think they're going to win the AFC West again. They were kind of scaring me that they weren't going to win. Teams like the Raiders were even putting their name in for an AFC West winner. I mean, they had a really good down the stretch season after firing Josh McDaniels, but I'll talk about them in a sec. For the Kansas City Chiefs, they won the Super Bowl last year. They're obviously the best team in the league, I think. Even though I have them losing like a game versus the Ravens to start them off, because like obviously they need more rest from a Super Bowl victory. They've had a lot of offseason drama, man. Rashee Rice got into a hit and run, or was in a hit and run, hit multiple cars. He will not be suspended, very shockingly. Hollywood Brown got hurt, will miss significant time. One of the defensive linemen was arrested for a drunk driving. Kadarius Toney was released. Travis Kelce drama in the offseason, especially with the Taylor Swift stuff, and they have a lot of drama. But then again, they're such a phenomenal football team that that all the drama overlooks how good the Chiefs really are. And yeah, I mean they're pretty much they've developed into a top 10 defense with Spagnuolo, even though they did trade away L'Jarius Sneed, who arguably was their best defensive player, obviously with Chris Jones, but again, he missed a lot. He missed some time last year. Trent McDuffie was a first-team All-Pro as a slot. They have Nick Bolton, who's a phenomenal linebacker. Their defensive edge unit, like with Karlaftis and stuff, it's okay, but you kind of have just such a well-rounded team, top 10 offense, top 10 defense at minimum, and their schedule is a bit weaker than their schedule is a bit weaker this year, especially because they face the NFC South. So I think they're going to pretty much sweep them. I mean, I really like this team. I think that they lose some weird games, but then again, I think that they are just going to win a lot of close games and finish 12-5. I do have them finishing as the 1 seed, but then again, I do think the Texans could rival them for the 1 seed. I have the Raiders finishing as the 9th best team in the AFC. I have them going 9-8 again. They were one of my favorite teams over the offseason. I think they were one of my winners. You sign Christian Wilkins for a lot of money. I think it was like 4 years, $80 million. You have I mean, the defensive line unit, especially if Tyree Wilson breaks out, that line unit of Crosby, Wilkins, and Tyree Wilson could be really, really impactful, especially against the run. But then again, their defense is going to be really good. I'm sorry, I'm messing up. I know I'm going to mess up their head coach's name, Antonio Pierce. There it is. I really like the culture that he's bringing into this team. You know, the old Raider way. But then again, the offense. You kind of look at the quarterback group with Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew, and even Pierce said it himself. He was like, I wanted the better man to win, but nobody really won that quarterback battle. So I think they're going to be a bit, you know, I don't think their quarterback play is going to be the best, but then again, they have two really good receivers with Devontae Adams, and you have Myers, Josh Myers as well in there. And the running back with Zamir White, we'll see what their running back room looks like. Their offensive line is, again, okay. But then again, they're going to win some close games. Like, they're going to win. I have them beating the Ravens in, like, a very weird game. Beating, like, the Browns. Beating the Chiefs, like, splitting with the Chiefs. I think they're going to have a fun year. I don't think they will be good enough. I don't think they have a good enough roster to be a playoff team. But then again, I don't think they'll be a bad team. So that's a perfect record to go 9-8. The Broncos are a team that I think will do a lot worse than their 7-10 record shows. I'm not very high on the Broncos. I thought they were arguably better. They had a better roster last year. They kind of cut ties with a lot of guys like Jerry Jeudy and then Russell Wilson. Those are the best examples. And I'm not very high in their defense. And then they have a very hard strength of schedule, both above the 500 SOV and SOS. And then you kind of don't know what you have with Bo Nix so far. He did look good in the preseason, but obviously good preseason rookie quarterbacks. It's hard to kind of say how they'll do in the regular season. Like Zach Wilson's a perfect example. He had a really good preseason, and then he didn't have a good regular season. But then again, Bo Nix, I think, is a more consistent quarterback, or will be a more consistent quarterback than maybe even Russell Wilson, even though he did have 26 touchdowns last year. And then the running game, I don't think highly on the running game at all for the Broncos. You have Williams, who has just been really inconsistent, hasn't really come back from his ACL tear. I think Jaleel McLaughlin will end up as the starting running back. And then the receiver core is arguably the worst in the league. Cortland Sutton and Troy Franklin, and they cut Tim Patrick, so I thought he would make the starting roster. I'm concerned about that, especially. And then their tight end room with Greg Dulcich. He's been hurt every year of his career, or his 2 years of his career so far. So don't really know what you're going to have with the offense. And then the defense is just okay. You've got Pat Surtain. He did allow a lot of touchdowns last year. I don't think they'll be the best team, but then again, I think they're going to win some like weird games with Sean Payton, but overall finish with 10 plus losses. And then moving on to the Los Angeles Chargers, the last team I want to go over in the AFC. Arguably my least favorite team next to the Patriots. This is, I think, a bad team that didn't grow as much as it needed to kind of overcome their humps. You got your new head coach. Why am I forgetting his name? Michigan head coach. Is it? I forget which Harbaugh it is every single time. Whatever Harbaugh. We'll call it that. Harbaugh's coming in from Michigan. Michigan had a huge cheating scandal, of course, so he had to come to the NFL and goes to the Chargers, who you do have Justin Herbert. But then again, Herbert goes out of the season last year. I think he had like an injury scare in training camp as well. And then he comes in with the worst receiving core in the league. I think, no doubt, this is the worst receiving core in the league. You do have Ladd McConkey, who you drafted in the early bit of the second round, who I am very high on. I think he is going to be the wide receiver one. But then again, it's just like Joshua Palmer, Quentin Johnston's arguably the worst first round pick I've ever seen. He can't haul in a ball to save his life. And then your defense is extremely weak. Your secondary is terrible. I mean, safety unit, cornerback unit, very bad units. Your linebacker unit is, again, pretty bad. Your defensive line, sure, you still have Khalil Mack, and you still have Joey Bosa. But, like, they're not even like that crazy impactful on games to kind of affect how bad their defense is. Like they give up 63 points versus the Raiders last year. Like I don't think that, I know that they had a good draft. I thought that the Chargers had a good draft, but this is gonna still be a rebuilding year, and yeah, I mean I have them basically second worst in the AFC and going 5-12. I am very eager to talk about this NFC North division. Man, I really do like the NFC North. I really do. And I mean, it boils down to me basically putting the Packers as the 1 seed. I think that whichever team, whether the Packers or the Lions, I think that the number 1 seed is in the NFC North. I think that's what I think. That's my take. I think that the 1 seed is either the Packers or Lions. Don't sleep on the Bears. I'm going to talk about them later. I mean, I really, really, really like this division. You have the Packers, and I'll talk about them first. Have them winning some very, very, very crazy games. Like, I have them beating the Niners. I have them beating the Eagles. Like, I have them splitting with the Bears. I have them beating the Dolphins. I have them beating the Seahawks. I have them beating, the Colts, who are all playoff teams. Look at their record versus playoff teams. 6-3. And with one of the hardest strength of schedules in the league. They have a hard strength schedule. I think that they will be one of the better teams in the league. And I think that was really shown in the playoffs last year. Demolished the Cowboys, who, again, I have them. I don't know if they played the Cowboys this year. But, I mean, they demolished the Cowboys in the playoffs. It was a last drive game versus the 49ers, where obviously Love threw an interception. But they were in that game as well. And they have one of the deepest wide receiver cores in the league with Romeo Doubs, with Reed, with Watson, with Dontavius Wicks. Jordan Love, I think, will be an MVP candidate. Obviously, I think it'll be between Jordan Love, Patrick Mahomes, and it will be CJ Stroud. I think that's the MVP race really this year. Love will probably lead the league in passing touchdowns, and the rushing game is only going to get better. Really, I know Aaron Jones was kind of out with inconsistencies. AJ Dillon, thank God they put him on IR so they do not have to give him the ball. One of the worst running backs in the league. One of the slowest as well. But now you added Josh Jacobs. Like, the dude led the league in rushing yards 2 years ago. Still had 1,000 last year. And then their defense, I don't know exactly his name, but they got the head coach from Boston College to come in as their defensive coordinator. He led a really good defense for Boston College. So I think that this team's going to be a very good team, especially Jordan Love and especially the offense. They're going to arguably put up like 25 points a game. Like, that's how good I think their offense could be. And then I have them as the 1 seed. I still have the Lions being as a really good team this year. I know a lot of people predict that they're going to face, heavy regression. And I would have said that they would if they lost Ben Johnson, their offensive coordinator, to a head coaching gig last year. But since he didn't leave, I still think they're going to be really good. I think they have the same record as last year. They do have a hard strength of schedule. Obviously, it's in the upper fives. It's top, I think, 5 in the league. And they face a lot of offensive teams like the Rams, like the Cardinals, like the Cowboys, like the Packers, like the Texans, like the Bears, like the Bills, like the 49ers. They face a lot of offensive teams. And that's kind of the question, whether the defense is going to hold up for it. When you look at their defense, you're kind of like, all right, the linebacker core is all right with Alex Anzalone and Jack Campbell, who Jack Campbell's still young. You have a young secondary. You have like Kirby Joseph is still on his rookie contract. You drafted Terrion Arnold. You have Brian Branch, who had a phenomenal season. You have Aiden Hutchinson. All these guys are on the rookie deal. And then you have their obviously defensive line, who I'm a bit more worried about their edge depth. You saw like they really only had one guy with Aiden Hutchinson last year. I know that you say really only had like I think another guy had like 8 sacks, but was not nearly as efficient or as impactful as Aiden Hutchinson, who had 100 pressures last year. But then again, their offense, it pretty much stayed the same with Jahmyr Gibbs, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jared Goff, Penei Sewell. Pretty much have a one-of-one offense, which I am very excited for. I think it's still going to be a top 5 unit. And as well as the Lions, I think they're going to be a very good team. It's just that the Packers have one win over them, so they are the 1 seed. But then again, I think the Lions could easily win this division again. And then the Bears, this is a team that I am very excited for, and I think that Bears fans should be extremely excited about how their team is going to do this year. Drafting Caleb Williams and Remo Odunze, I think, is going to take their team over the top. Last year, they were not as good, obviously. They finished with the 9th overall pick, but then again, they had the first overall pick from the Panthers. Very, very good move from Ryan Poles. But then you saw the trade of Montez Sweat and how that really changed their defense. They have a major disruptor who can stop the run. They have cornerbacks with Jalen Johnson, who was an All-Pro last year. They have a very good safety in why am I forgetting his name? Jaquan Brisker. And I think the defense was ranked like top after they traded for Sweat. It became a top 15 defense. And the offense, man, I'm just so excited for the offense, dude. They almost totally rebuild their offensive skill position unit from Fields and from all these players in the last 2 years. You have DJ Moore. You traded for Keenan Allen. You drafted Rome Odunze. That wide receiver trio is arguably the best in the NFL, only rivaling maybe the Texans and like the Packers. You have Caleb Williams, who had, like, look at him in the preseason. I don't want to overreact, but I was really high on Williams as a prospect, and you look at him in the preseason, magician, absolutely. He was phenomenal, and I think that's gonna be the Bears this year. I think they're gonna average like 3 offensive touchdowns a game. You signed DeAndre Swift in free agency, and you still have Khalil Herbert. You still have Rashawn Johnson. You have this offensive depth. Maybe the offensive line isn't the greatest, especially the interior, but it was a lot better than it was the last couple of years. Their line. It just happens to be that they're in one of the toughest divisions, the toughest division really in the NFC. But I think that Williams is going to be the rookie of the year. I think that he has 20-something plus touchdowns. I think he maybe throws for 4,000 yards. If you're a Bears fan, you guys are going to be good. I think you're going to be really good. Have them making the playoffs, and I have them going 10-7. I had to make them 10-7 so that they could jump the Cardinals, who are the 8th seed, which I'll talk about in a second. But I really do think they're going to go 9-8, but then make the playoffs. Moving on to the Minnesota Vikings, who are they would have been a good team if it wasn't for JJ McCarthy's injury. And they have I think the hardest strength of schedule in the league. Like, they have a really rough schedule. I think they face pretty much a good or borderline good team every single week. Like, it's going to get rough for them. I mean, you go like Niners, Texans, Packers, Jets, Lions, Rams, Colts, Jaguars in order. Like, oh my God. And then you go like the Bears and then the Cardinals and the Falcons. The Bears again. I mean, they're going to have a tough schedule. I still have them going 6-11. With a Kevin O'Connell-led offense, they're still going to be a good offense that moves the ball. It's just Sam Darnold. I don't really trust Sam Darnold to finish a full season as like this very good quarterback. He has too many inconsistencies. And you still have Justin Jefferson, who's coming back from injury last year, kind of missed a lot of the year. But he still averaged 100 yards a game, still finished the season with 1,000 yards. And then Aaron Jones as a running back, he's almost over 30. I think this is probably going to be his last year of major production. And then the defense it's okay. I won't spend too much time on the Vikings. I don't think they will be as worse as teams like the Giants or the Panthers. But then again, with their very hard strength of schedule and losing JJ McCarthy, who could have been your boost down the season, I think they'll struggle a bit. I do think they'll finish with above 10 losses. And then moving on to the San Francisco 49ers, who did unfortunately lose the Super Bowl. I thought that they had a good chance to win that game if it wasn't for Dre Greenlaw's injury. Probably, it's hard to say if they would have won the season or if they would have won the Super Bowl, but I know a lot of teams are going to say that they're going to regress. I know a lot of people are saying that it's Brock Purdy's year to kind of fail, and we don't know what's going on with Ayuk. I think Ayuk stays. Like, he wants it's like $30 million. If he goes to the Steelers, like, good for you, man. You're gonna get money, but then you're gonna go to like a borderline team. Meanwhile, you can stay with money on a San Francisco 49ers team that could be really good in the next like 4 or 5 years. Could actually win a Super Bowl. Like, I don't see the Steelers winning a Super Bowl in the next 5 years. Like, the Niners were just there 2 times in the last 5 years. But then again, moving to other guys, like, their offense is pretty much the same. Hopefully Trent Williams comes back because their offensive line looks rough without him, and that's very shown when Purdy plays without him. Doesn't play as well. And then their defense is obviously they have a stellar defense led by Fred Warner, who's just a phenomenal player. Nick Bosa, another phenomenal player. But they didn't obviously make as much moves this offseason. didn't lose as many players. If they lost Ayuk, that would have been their headline, which has been their the whole year. But I still think they're going to be good. I still think they're going to beat some good teams. I just think it's going to be a bit of a closer year than it has been in the last two. I don't think they're going to blow out teams as often. I think it's going to be a lot of close ones. But I still have them being second in the NFC and having an 11-6 record. The Cardinals are another one of my favorite teams. I think they had a very productive offseason, especially on offense, and with adding Marvin Harrison Jr., who you rarely see rookies kind of take over a team. And I think that there are two rookies that have that ability this year, which are Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison Jr. And that reflects in both of their records, going from the Bears, I think, had only 6 wins, or they had 6 or 7 wins last year. And the Cardinals had 4. Or sorry, the Cardinals had, no, they had 4 wins last year. I think they take both of the teams over the edge. And I mean, speaking about the Cardinals, you get Kyler Murray back, who he had a very, very productive back half of the season when he came back. The Cardinals, I think, averaged more than 20 points a game, which is very, very surprising for a team that I thought had a bad offensive roster. James Conner was very good last year. You add Trey Benson. Marvin Harrison Jr., I think, is a 1,400-yard receiver year one, which is very, very, that's high praise from Marvin Harrison, who I think I think he's going to be very good. The defense is the only thing that I really worry about, because they allowed over 20 points a game. I think they allowed the 4th most points in the league. No, they allowed the most points in the league, I think. I don't know. With Jonathan Gannon a head coach, I don't think he's more. Is he just like a leader kind of head coach? He's weird. I don't know his whole situation with how he runs the team. I don't even know if he calls defensive plays. But then again, I kind of looked at their schedule, and I looked at, okay, is this team a very good offensive team? Yes. And then they'll win the game. Like Bills, offensive team, win the game. Like Lions, a perfect example. I have them beating the 49ers, but then again, like the Packers, offensive team, win the game. Jets, offensive team, win the game. Or not really offensive team, win the game. But then again, I have them like finishing very strong down the list. I have them like losing weird games, like lose against the Patriots to make the record work out. I do like the Cardinals. I have them going 9-8. The Seahawks were a team that I teetered over. I didn't understand, or I didn't quite really know where to put them, other than I knew not to put them in the playoffs. I don't think they're as good of as a team this year. I mean, I think they went 9-8 last year as well. I mean, they've gone 9-8 in my prediction the last 3 years. The one thing that I really like about this team is going to be their secondary unit, because you add Mike McDaniel. And Mike McDaniel led the #1 defense in the league last year. And could we see revitalization of the Legion of Boom? Tariq Woolen is getting starter reps again. Last year, he kind of lost that role. Devin Witherspoon was a rookie Pro Bowler. Witherspoon had a phenomenal year. Jordan Brooks did leave in free agency, which I thought Brooks would be a piece that Mike McDaniel wouldn't want to lose on the defensive side. The defensive line is okay, but then again, the offense, you have a wide receiver trio of Lockett, Metcalf, and Jackson Smith-Njigba, who I don't know if Smith and Njigba is gonna have a breakout year. We'll kind of see if he takes over Lockett's role and kind of jumps him. But then Geno Smith had his regression year last year. Is he gonna further regress? I think so. I think that Smith is gonna regress further. And then the running back core with Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker. It's okay. Like Walker he can break away for a ton of plays, but he's very inconsistent. Charbonnet just is not an explosive player, but then can play in the receiving game. I don't know. I think they're going to be a very middling team, and that's why I have them, as a 9th seed. But then again, I couldn't give them. I had to give them some of these games, like split with the Cardinals, beat like the Broncos. They don't have the hardest strength of schedule this year. Like beat the Patriots, beat the Giants. They have some obvious games that they're going to win. But then again, I have them going 9-8. And one of my more out there takes this year is I think that the Rams are going to regress a lot. And it really boils down to a few things, really. The first thing is obvious, the strength of schedule. When you look at their schedule, they face a lot of really good teams, as well as their SOV is really, really high. But I mean, yeah, the Rams, the big offseason loss was Aaron Donald, a Hall of Fame player. very hard, gap to fill. I mean, they do have Kobe Turner, who had 9 sacks last year, but Aaron Donald, man, he's going to be hard to replace. They did draft Jared Verse. They do have Byron Young in the outside. So I like their edge group. But their Akil Witherspoon is their cornerback one, and he did good last year, but I think they're going to see a lot of inconsistencies within the secondary. Like Josh Johnson is a starting safety. Their linebacking core, they just traded away Ernest Jones, who led the team in tackles last year. Puka Nacua has like some strange ankle injury. Strange knee injury that he had in training camp that might halt him. Cooper Kupp has been dealing with injuries the last 2 years. I mean, I don't think we'll ever see a peak that he had with the 1,900-yard season. Won the Triple Crown, and he won Super Bowl MVP as well. We'll never see a season out of him like that again, or a season maybe even like that again. And then Matthew Stafford has just been dealing with more and more injuries. Like he had a UCL injury in the beginning of last year. He was kind of getting hit a lot last year because the offensive line isn't very good. But I think that they will win a few games, and especially those like firepower games, like against like the Lions, against like the Cardinals. But then I think down the stretch, they're going to lose a ton of games. Like you can see the amount of losses that I have in their last 10 games. And that's kind of how I see the regression happening. Moving on to the NFC East, I know that there has been a different NFC East division winner over the last like 20 years or something like that, something crazy. But I think that this year there is one clear team that I'd bet on to win this division, and that is the Cowboys, particularly because they didn't have a lot of offseason transition. Did lose Dan Quinn, who I'll get to later, their defensive coordinator. They re-signed CeeDee Lamb, pretty much their biggest offseason move. I think it was like $116 million for 4 years, something very generous for CeeDee Lamb, who's a top 2 receiver in the league, arguably, the best, arguably. And then you have Dak Prescott, who's likely going to get a contract extension over this offseason. That kind of leaves Micah Parsons as the odd man out. The receiver core with Brandon Cooks, and I think Jalen Tolbert is going to step up as the wide receiver 3. Solid core. You're bringing Zeke back, who will be your goal line back. Very efficient on the goal line. That's kind of his game nowadays. And then their defense with Trayvon Diggs and Deron Bland, who Bland was a Pro Bowler last year. He's going to start on the IL. This is a secondary who's going to he's going to force a lot of turnovers, but then give up points. Like Bland led the league in interceptions, had 5 pick sixes, which was an NFL record. Obviously, we know what Trayvon Diggs, Bland didn't have a lot of 11. Bland had 8, did lead the league. And you had Trayvon Diggs. He had 11 interceptions 2 years ago. Like he can force a lot. This is a secondary that just forces a lot of interceptions. And then your defensive line with DeMarcus Lawrence and Micah Parsons, it's obviously going to be pretty similar. And then they drafted Tyler Guyton, who I think is going to transition to left tackle, which is strange. I saw his film at Oklahoma. He was like a raw technical right tackle, and they're moving him over to the other side to kind of replace Tyron Smith, who they lost in the offseason, goes to the New York Jets. But other than that, I kind of look at how weak the schedule is this year, especially the schedule that they play. And I'm like, yeah, this team is probably going to win a lot of games. They do face some tough teams. Like their schedule could be bad. Like they do face the Texans. They face the Eagles, Niners, Ravens. But then like the Giants, and then like I think that they beat the Steelers. Like they face the Commanders twice, Giants twice, obviously. I think that they have some free wins here and there. And overall, I do have them winning the division. The Eagles are another team that I don't really like for the 2024 season, but this is the team that I think is going to overcome that. Not really overcome it. I think they're going to struggle a lot, but I think that it's simply due to the weak schedule that they have, like a .64 strength of schedule, and they face 10 teams that I have with a losing record. Like I only have them being 1-4 versus playoff teams, 3-4 versus teams with over a 500 record. Like they face so many teams that I don't think will be good this year, and particularly the NFC South, particularly teams like the Browns, like the Giants. They face Commanders twice. They face the Steelers, like the Panthers. They have a lot of teams that I don't think will be good, and I think they have still a good enough roster to not overcome, but kind of mask the things that they were really bad at last year. Like example is secondary. Bradbury and Slay had bad years. They drafted Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell. They'll be young. They will definitely make mistakes. And then their safety unit is young as well with like Sidney Brown, I think will become the starter this year. And their defensive line, they signed Bryce Huff. They still have Jalen Carter. They still have Fletcher Cox, who's coming back for one last year. And then their offense led by Jalen Hurts. Still have AJ Brown. Still have Devontae Smith. Devontae Smith got a contract extension. And then the running back room added Saquon Barkley. So I think their offense will still be very good. It just won't be the same type of offense. I think they're going to pass. They're going to be forced to pass the ball a lot more because you lose Jason Kelce. And I mean, that is arguably the biggest loss for any team outside of Aaron Donald, because Jason Kelce is just a consistent first team All Pro at the age of like 30 plus. I don't think tush push will be as efficient. I don't think Jalen Hurts will have as many rushing touchdown numbers as he has, but I think that the passing game won't be as affected just because of the receiver talent that they have. So I still think that, very weak strength of schedule. I think they're going to be fine, even have a lot of close games versus weak teams, and then finish the season 10-7. In the Commanders' first year under Dan Quinn and after drafting rookie Jaden Daniels, I still think that they will go. I think they'll go 6-11. As you can see, look at how many times that the right team has won every but 3 games. Very interesting sight to see there. But they don't have the hardest schedule. They do have a lot of teams that they will win, and I have them going 0-8 away, much better home, of course, 6-3. But I think this team will have some up and downs. I think that Jaden Daniels, especially with the weakness that I think that their offensive line is, they didn't really address offensive line in free agency or the draft. I think that Jaden Daniels, who had a really high sack or pressure to sack ratio, I think he's going to feel a lot of pressure. I think he'll make a lot of mistakes due to that. But then again, he's going to get out of a lot of those, get out of a lot of that trouble because of his rushing ability, because he can throw the ball deep. You trade away Jahan Dotson to the Eagles. It's not the biggest move in the world. You still have Terry McLaurin, who I think will have another good year, of course. Transition more to a traditional deep threat than he kind of hasn't been able to do based on quarterback struggles with the Commanders. Their defense will be hopefully a little bit better. They have a good interior with Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne. Their secondary with Emmanuel Forbes, he'll probably be one of the worst cornerbacks in the league. They're still a rebuilding team. I think the Commanders, what the 6-11 really will kind of boil down to was how good was Jaden Daniels. That's the future of your franchise. And then please look away, Giants fans. I know too many of you. I'm very sorry, Giants fans. I think that you guys will be in line for the first overall pick this year. They don't have the easiest schedule. Obviously, they don't have the hardest schedule, but they are simply one of my least favorite teams. I mean, just for so many reasons. The biggest one is your offensive strengths. You completely lost all of it over the offseason. You lost Saquon Barkley, and he was your major producer for the last, I don't know how many years. I know you did draft Malik Nabers, but Malik Nabers is going to have to deal with a bad quarterback in Daniel Jones, who, he threw 2 interceptions in his only preseason game coming off, looked very, very nervous, looked very hesitant, and I think that's going to easily reflect into this season. Hard Knocks, loved Hard Knocks. Giants Hard Knocks, I loved that. It was an awesome segment on their draft, but man, Joe Schoen, I think his head's on the chopping block this year. I don't even think it's Dable's fault. Dable led you guys to the playoffs. And I think that after the offseason moves and the moves you've made in the draft and signing and your player signings and extensions, I think that's really been the issue with this team, with signing the wrong guys, letting the wrong guys go. There's so little to like, especially you lose Wink Martindale, just left the building basically. I think their defense is not going to be good at all this year. I think I don't even, you lose Xavier McKinney as well as at safety. Banks will probably still be good. I don't know. I think it's gonna be a tough year. Just thinking about it, I think it'll be a tough year for the Giants, like it was last year. And I have them going 4-13, and it's just very unfortunate for them. And then moving on to easily my least favorite, and I think the least entertaining division in the entire league, is going to be the NFC South. And the only team that I really favor this year is going to be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I have them basically doing the same thing as they did last year. winning late, like I would have them winning 5 games late in the season, struggling early on because they face a lot of tough teams like the Lions, they face, the Eagles, they face the Ravens, they face the Chiefs, they face the Niners. Very tough beginning of the season. It kind of tapers off in the end of the season, like with Giants games against the Giants, like the Chargers, the Panthers again. So basically, that's how I think their season is going to go. I think it's going to be the same as last year. I think Baker's going to play pretty much identical. Mike Evans and Chris Godwin will be just as good. Grant Barton will be their new center, so hopefully he'll produce well. And then their defense is fine. Really, really worried about their secondary, though. Zion McClellan, or sorry, I forget his name, but he'll be the cornerback too, is the listed cornerback too after Davis, which is concerning. I think their defensive line is just okay, and their linebacking core is going to be old. Like Devin White is gone, and then they have Lavonte David coming back, I think 1 more year, and he's like 32. Their defense is probably not going to be that good, but then again, their schedule's not that hard. I mean, they only face 4 and 5 versus winning teams. They face 8 teams that have losing, only 6 playoff teams. So yeah, I just have them going 9 and 8, but I do have them winning the division. The Falcons are my second favorite team in this division, but not particularly. I could easily have them losing out to the Saints a few times, but I have them 4 and 2 in the division because of that. I think I had them beat the Saints twice, just so that the record would work out. No, I don't have them. I have them beating the Panthers twice. But yeah, I mean, I really do like the addition of Kirk Cousins or Michael Penix Jr. It just couldn't have been both. That was a crazy move to make. And then Cousins is coming off of an ACL. You sign him to a huge $160 million deal, right? And then you draft Michael Penix Jr. and you say that's for the future, but he's 23 years old. And that's the first thing that confuses me. But then again, I'm really high on Bijan Robinson this year. I think that the offense is a lot more open now that Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heinicke, those are two, you can just load the box. That's why Bijan Robinson had to struggle. They put 7 in the box almost every time. You look at the wide receiver core, it's pretty much Drake London, and then Ray McCloud is the wide receiver 3. Their wide receiver 2 is, I don't even know. Their receiver core is really, really bad. They have no depth outside of Drake London, who probably will have a phenomenal season, a 1,200-yard season. But God forbid he gets hurt. The defense, you have it a decent secondary. They have kind of 2 superstar guys. They just re-signed AJ Terrell to a 4-year, $80 million deal. You have Jesse Bates. But then their defensive line, their edge depth is nothing. They don't have a great edge group. They don't have a great linebacker group. I wonder how Zach Robinson, their new offensive coordinator, because they have Raheem Morris, the defensive coordinator of the Rams, who's coming in. And then you have Zach Robinson, who's the passing game coordinator for the Lions. We'll see what kind of system he puts in. But I'm not very high on their team. Even though they have a weak schedule, I have them going 8-9. And then you have the Saints, another one of my least favorite teams in the league this year. Look at their schedule. A little more difficult than the rest of the NFC South because they face Cowboys, Eagles, Chiefs. Their back half of the schedule is pretty weak. They face the Packers. They face some good teams. But Derek Carr, I don't know. I don't know what to say about Derek Carr. He consistently puts up numbers, but he is not at all he's not very good. The receiver core is made up of Rashid Shaheed and Chris Olave. They don't really have any depth anymore. Michael Thomas is pretty much gone. I don't know if they cut him because of dead cap reasons. Their defense, and then Alvin Kamara is not a very efficient running back. Their offensive line has been getting really injured the past couple of years. So I'm not very high on their offense particularly, and I'm not the highest in their defense either. You do have Marshawn Lattimore, who is still keeping that defense strong, and you do have Demario. You have Demario Davis as your linebacker, who's just been still phenomenal as an over 30 years old linebacker. But pretty much, I'm just not very Tyrann Mathieu. I think got another extension too. I'm not very high on the Saints, even though I have them going as a 9-8 record because again they face 10 teams that I have as a losing record, which I think they're better than the worst teams in the league, but they're not even close to the teams that are above 500. So I have them going 8-9 and finishing 3rd in the division. And then I'll quickly go over the Panthers because they're again another team. I don't think they're going to be very good. They just don't have kind of the schedule or the roster to really compete with good teams still. I think they're such a far way away from where they were last season. And they improved a lot. Like, they signed Damian Lewis to a 3-year deal. They signed Robert Hunt to a 4-year deal. 2 interior offensive line additions. Very, very good, especially for, like, the worst offensive line in the league. Still really worried about their tackle duo. Ike Mekwonu looks like a bust. You traded for Deontay Johnson, who I'm not very high on. He did play 100% of the snaps in the first couple of drives in the preseason. Xavier Legette, don't know how impactful he's going to be year one. Adam Thielen is going to be good as well. Very consistent player. And then their defense, I mean, still a pretty bad defensive unit. They really addressed offense in the offseason, so it'll likely be the same defense as last year, like performance-wise. Traded away Brian Burns to the Giants. So yeah, I'm not very high on Bryce Young. I don't know how he's gonna overcome and be a top, arguably 20 quarterback based on his physical limitations. Like, he doesn't throw to the sidelines very well. He doesn't throw over the middle very well. He's short, so he can't see over the line as well. Can throw deep, okay, but not like he can't really stretch the ball forward. I just think the Panthers are in just such a horrible situation. I think they're going to be bad for a long time. And unfortunately, it's because of their trade for Bryce Young. You look at how the Bears have Kalen Williams, and I gave them 10 wins because of it. I don't know. They're in a very, very tough situation, and it looks gloomy, and I think it'll continue to be bad this year. Their owner just really needs to sell the team because wow, man. Wow. I don't know how they can really overcome their struggles. Jonathan Brooks, he's coming off of an ACL too. I don't know how impactful he'll be year one. But getting into the playoffs, I didn't do this list, but I kind of have I have my thoughts straightened out already. This is how I see the playoffs going. Jets, Ravens, Texans, Lions, Cowboys, Eagles. It really could be the Bears here. But before I see the Bears on tape and on field, I will go with the Cowboys, which will be a little, strange. And then I'll give the Lions the win here. I'll give the 49ers the win here. Chiefs beat the Jets. Texans beat the Ravens. And I think that the Texans will go to the Super Bowl, and I think the Lions will go to the Super Bowl. And then I think my Super Bowl prediction is going to be the Houston Texans this year. I think C.J. Stroud is going to be the MVP. I think that they'll have the best wide receiver trio in the league, arguably 3 1,000-yard receivers. They have offensive firepower. They have a young defensive core, which I think will only get better. Example, Will Anderson and Devin Singletary. And then DeMarco Ryan. Thought he was a phenomenal head coach. I mean, Texans went from the worst team in the AFC South to the best, and I think they're one of the best teams in the league this year. And I think that it's kind of like a Bengals season, how the Bengals in year 2 of Joe Burrow made the Super Bowl, and it kind of comes down to this too as well with the Lions. Lions are one of my favorite teams in the league, and I think they're going to have a strong showing. And it kind of boils down to how the 49ers bounce back this year, and how good the Packers could potentially do in the playoffs, which I think I had them losing, of course, to the I had them losing to the Lions, who, of course, I think the Lions will win. But that's going to be a tough game, man. That's going to be a very, very brutal game. But that's going to do it for this video. That's going to be my prediction for the 2024-2025 NFL season. Of course, I would really like the Jets to win the playoffs, or the Jets to win the Super Bowl, but I think a playoff win is kind of what I think is going to happen this year. And then let me know your record predictions for your favorite teams, and let me know how you thought about my list. The AFC I have is pretty much turning out really similar to how it did last year, except the Colts and the Jets entering the playoffs. And then in the NFC, the Bears entering the playoffs, Packers being the 1 seed, and then pretty much that's the same thing. But let's get into this video. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.